Today we're going to talk about macro-level social change and how that impacts the self. Kenneth Gergen wrote this book called The Dissolution of the Self, and he's reflecting on postmodern times. That means right now, the current moment. Today, we can travel great distances. I can be on a plane and fly to Saudi Arabia, or be on a plane and fly to Australia. Through the media and the internet, I can see people in South America. I can see a scientist on Antarctica. I can see what's going on in Russia. I can go onto my computer and do Skype with somebody who's in another country. We have access to countless others through the media and the internet. Our families are changing. We now have different types of families, step families. We have half-brothers, half-sisters. We have homosexual families. We have heterosexual families. Our education has become extremely specialized. In the old days, when you went to high school, you got a general education. College was just a liberal arts education. Today, people are majoring in psychology, biology, sociology, anthropology. So we have a very specialized education system. When you go to graduate school, it gets even more specialized. If you're going to medical school, you have a specialization. You might be an ear, nose, and throat doctor or a foot doctor. Consequently, our work has become specialized. You can be a community college sociologist, or you can be one that works at a university specializing in a particular area of knowledge. Doctors have specializations. Even machine workers have specializations. And obviously, we have more and more religions every day. In the old days, in pre-modern period, people didn't travel as much. Technology limited our exposure to others. There might have been newspapers around a certain time period, but prior to that, you wouldn't get news from around the world. You didn't have a 24-hour news cycle. The family was not just a family. The father was not just the father. He was also a teacher. He was the boss, and if you were in a very rural area, your father was also your spiritual leader. So the family basically served many, many social functions, whereas today, many social functions are served outside of the family. So Gergen is looking at this big macro-level change that's happened to our society, and he asks the question, what does this mean for the self? What are the implications for how we understand ourselves? He argues that as macro-level institutions change, the self must change too. He says at the macro level, our relationship to time and space have changed. Now, going to somewhere like Australia doesn't seem like an impossibly long venture. We could probably be on a plane for one day and get there. Same thing, I can talk to people in China and play video games with people in China. Time and space is not as much of an issue. Multiphrenia. He argues that because of these macro-level changes, people are splitting themselves. They're becoming invested in many, many places. And he argues that this is problematic. There's competing demands on us. There's competing voices. We don't know what's right. We don't know what's wrong. He argues that as we want things, we become slaves to those things, and then we feel inadequate. We feel like we can't make decisions because there's so many voices whispering into our ears. We do not know what to value anymore. He refers to this as multiphrenia. So for Gergen, the postmodern period is very negative for the self. Gergen is very similar to Waskul, who wrote that article about cyberspace and cyberselves. Gergen argues that we live in a world where a core, consistent self no longer is a reality. He argues that we are fragmented and fluid. His whole argument can be summarized as, who can I be with you? Gergen says, as we fly to China, as we fly to India, as we do video chats with people in different places, we're not being this core, consistent self. Maybe I'm into S&M, and I do that over here, and then I go to my church and I act a different way. And he argues that there's so much potential and so much possibility, there's so many different conflicting values going on, that we are fragmented, fluid, and we don't have a core self anymore. Gubrium and Holstein also engaged this idea of macro-level social change. They agree with Gergen. They agree. They say that when macro-level change occurs, it has consequences for the self. So on that point, they are in agreement. However, they think that Gergen's being a little bit negative, and that he's not seeing any potential for positive characteristics. So they say there are positive opportunities for the self, but they want to temper that positive, orientation with the idea that there are dangers and inequalities for the self. So we're going to talk about the dangers and the inequalities. Similar to Irvine, Gubrium and Holstein argue that institutions provide autobiographical occasions. They argue that a core consistent self does exist, and narrative and institutions are important for the creation of selfhood. So Gergen's off with Waskool, Gubrium and Holstein, they agree with Irvine. So let's look into this a little bit. What are the positive opportunities for the self? Well, Gubrium and Holstein want to talk about the idea that many major problems in our society can be dealt with by focusing on the self, institutions, and narratives. They argue that this is how we fix issues today. You're a sad person, you're unhappy with the world, or maybe something bad has happened to you. You go into some institution, and the institution offers you a new story and a new identity. If you accept the new story, you accept the new identity, you're a happy person. Now, I don't want to make this sound like it's only people who are super unhappy. They argue that there's lots of opportunities for the self, and if you are just bored, maybe you'll say, hey, I want to learn martial arts. And you go to the martial arts club, they give you a new story, a new identity. Suddenly, your story is, I'm a black belt in karate, and you have a new identity. I am a martial artist. Same thing with something like a gym. I'm not feeling too good about my body. Okay, go to the gym. They're going to teach you how to work out and stuff. But what you're also getting is a new story. I am a person that goes to the gym, and a new identity. So we don't just have to look at this as, somebody going to AA who, they're unhappy with their alcoholism. They go to AA, they get a new story, a new identity. They're saying this is happening all over the place. Any club, any organization is offering you a new story and a new identity, and those things are positive for our society. They give us good stuff. In addition, what's going on in our current moment in time is that people are feeling self-empowered, they are accepting responsibilities, and there's countless opportunities for the positive construction of self. If you want to be into toy model trains, you can do model trains as part of your identity. If you want to do martial arts, there's another option for you. You want to go into pottery or painting class, whatever it is, there's countless opportunities to create yourself and create a positive self. So they see this as the positive opportunities for the self. So we have to talk about the negative. They are worried about the inequalities of opportunity. Gubrium and Holstein argue that not everyone is offered the same opportunities for self-construction. Not everyone is offered the same narratives. Sociologists tend to look at things like the poor, women, minorities, homosexual, the disabled, and look at the opportunities that they are offered. What institutions and narratives are they being offered? There's a great example where if a rich person is a drug addict, we say they have chemical dependence, and they need to go to rehab. If a poor person has a drug addiction problem, we call them a drug addict. It's a different identity, and the poor person is going to drug court. So the idea here is that there is inequality of opportunity. If a rich person has any problem, they can use their money to go towards an institution and a story and an identity that has less stigma and allows them to sort of deal with the issue spin it in a positive way. Similarly, if we look at jobs, jobs are an opportunity to create yourself. I love saying that I teach college level classes. That makes me feel good. But what about other folks? What about their jobs? What jobs are open to the poor? What jobs are open to the rich? And do these different job locations nurture the self? In the reading, Gubrium and Holstein talk about, a lot of these corporate executives, they work at a place where there's a gym, where they can work out before they go to work, or in the middle of the day, or at the end of the day. They have daycare so they can see their kids and play with their kids. If they need to miss work, not a problem. Your family's important to us. Go home, take care of your kid. But if you're poor, your job might not have a gym there that takes care of your physical body. They might not be understanding about your family, which is the part of your familial self. So, are the jobs nurturing the self for the rich, for the poor? And this is an area where Gubrium and Holstein argue that there's inequality of opportunity. Last, Gubrium and Holstein also see some potential dangers in the postmodern moment. They argue that institutions make many demands on the self, very similar to Gergen. They argue that we fake it with our customers, with our bosses. And Gubrium and Holstein, and many sociologists, are worried that postmodern capitalism is making demands on our emotions. One of the most important scholars doing research on emotions is someone named Arlie Hochschild. Her work is extremely important. She argues that emotions provide us with a compass, which directs us towards the needs of our authentic selves. Now, Hochschild is worried because as we work a customer service job, sometimes our boss wants us to fake it and be happy and smile and laugh and do things like that. And Hochschild argues that we are only in danger if we become estranged from our emotions, which consequently means we are estranged from our authentic selves. So this is another area where Gubruim and Holstein are worried about the postmodern world. They're saying the world has changed. They agree with Gergen. In the old days, there was no television. Today, there's 500 channels. In the old days, there weren't 1,000 jobs. Today, there's 1,000 different types of jobs someone can work. And one of the dangers that we're looking at here is sort of the commodification of our emotions. As our jobs ask us to emote a certain way, there's a danger of us being estranged from ourselves. I hope that's helpful, and let me know if you need anything.